Welcome back. When you hear intellectual property, what pops into your head? Probably a smartphone design, right? Or maybe some complicated software code. But what about nature? What about the actual food sitting on your dinner table? Today, we're doing an explainer on exactly that. We're going to trace the wild journey of how a plant gets its very own legal identity in Brazil. We'll demystify the whole cultivar protection system, taking what is honestly a pretty dense legal framework and breaking it down so it makes perfect sense.
Okay, let's dive right into this. It's a fascinating question, really. How on earth do you patent a plant? Think about it. With technology, it's straightforward because we humans build it from scratch. But agriculture, we're talking about living, breathing, growing organisms. How do you draw a strict legal boundary around a new, sweeter type of passion fruit? Well, that is the ultimate puzzle of agricultural IP. And to figure it out, we've got to look at the official rulebook.
And just to be clear, we aren't guessing here. We're grounding today's explainer in hard data straight from the Brazilian government's portal, plus a fantastic, definitive presentation from the Ministry of Agriculture, specifically from Vera Lucia dos Santos Machado during a major symposium at the Federal University of Santa Maria. So we're getting our facts directly from the absolute top authorities on this subject.
Here's how we're going to break it all down. First, plant protection in Brazil. Second, what is UPOV? Third, the Brazilian system, known as the SNPC. Fourth, key protection concepts. Fifth, what exactly is being protected. And finally, how to actually consult these registered cultivars yourself.
Section 1. Plant protection in Brazil. The legal roots.
You see, before any country just started handing out patents for plants, there had to be this massive global push to make it happen. Countries didn't just wake up one day and decide to do this. The spark was actually the 1996 TRIPS Agreement, which is known as ADPIC in Brazil. Section 5, Article 27 of that World Trade Organization agreement basically laid down the law. It said, look, you can exclude basic microorganisms from patents, but you absolutely must protect new plant varieties. Countries could use standard patents or a specialized, unique sui generis system, or a mix of both. Essentially, this mandate forced nations worldwide to get their agricultural IP houses in order.
Moving on to Section 2. What is UPOV? The global framework. So if the WTO said, hey, you gotta protect plants, who actually sat down and wrote the rulebook? Enter UPOV, the International Union for the Protection of New Varieties of Plants. This was actually adopted way back in 1961 in Paris, which is kind of wild since a lot of modern biotech didn't even exist yet. It's been revised a few times since, in 72, 78, and 91, to keep pace with science. Headquartered in Geneva and linked to the World Intellectual Property Organization, UPOV has one profound mission: encourage the development of new plant varieties for the benefit of society. And it runs on reciprocity, meaning if you're a member, you protect the IP of the other members. And this chart brilliantly illustrates how these protections have just exploded over the decades. Seriously, look at the leap from the 1978 UPOV Act to the 1991 Act. In 78, countries could kind of pick and choose which species to protect. By 91, it covered literally all species. In 78, you were only protecting propagation material, like the seeds. Fast forward to 91, and literally any material from the cultivar is protected. The 91 update also cracked down on derived varieties and put strict limits on the farmer's privilege regarding safe seeds. It was a complete paradigm shift toward massive IP control.
Let's hit Section 3. The Brazilian system, SNPC, and national implementation.
Okay, so how do these big global treaties play out on the ground in Brazil, which is obviously a total agricultural powerhouse? Enter the ultimate gatekeeper, the SNPC, the National Cultivar Protection Service. These are the folks who turn international theory into national reality. They enforce Law Number 9.456 from 1997. If you want a plant protection certificate in Brazil, you have to go through the SNPC. They analyze your request and make sure everything lines up perfectly with those global UPOV rules.
Now, handling the IP for an entire country's agriculture is a colossal job, right? So the SNPC is broken into three very specialized divisions. First, the DNC handles all the normative regulations and registrations. Then you have the DTEC, taking care of the deep technical analysis for protection requests. And finally, the LADIC. They're the ones in the lab doing the actual physical testing and differentiation of living plant samples. It is a seriously well-oiled machine.
All right, Section 4, Key Protection Concepts. Let's demystify some of this legal jargon.
The crucial point here is the concept of novelty. You absolutely cannot just wander into the Amazon, pick a wild plant, and say, hey, I invented this, give me a patent. No way. That's a wild species. It belongs to nature.
To get intellectual property rights, it has to be an improved variety, meaning a human actually intervened, used science, and bred something genuinely new.
Next up is a really vital distinction, the obtentor. You can think of the obtentor as the money behind the operation. This is the entity or person who financed the research and legally holds the financial rights to the plant. And this is crazy important because the obtentor is very often not the actual genetic breeder. The scientist in the lab coat did the heavy lifting, sure, but the obtentor is the one who actually owns the patent.
So, how do you legally identify a plant? How does the law differentiate one soy plant from another? Well, they use what's called a descriptor. Think of a descriptor as the plant's unique biological fingerprint. It might be the exact shape of a leaf, a specific biochemical trait, or a genetic marker. These inherited characteristics are totally tailored to the specific biology of that exact plant, proving beyond a doubt that it is unique.
Then we have the EDV, or Essentially Derived Cultivar. This rule is here to stop blatant IP theft. Basically, you can't just take a competitor's protected plant, make one teeny-tiny genetic tweak, and start selling it as your own brilliant invention. If your plant is predominantly derived from an existing one, it's an EDV, and you literally cannot commercialize it without the original owner's permission.
Section 5. What is being protected? Let's talk about the sheer scale of Brazilian agriculture.
Stepping away from the legal jargon for a second, the real-world scale here is just staggering. We aren't just talking about giant fields of soy or corn. Right now in Brazil, 39 different species of fruit are legally protected. That covers everything from apples and bananas to avocados and mangoes. They even have 15 distinct legally protected species of passion fruit alone. The level of innovation going into the fruit we eat is mind-blowing.
And it goes way beyond food. There are 31 protected ornamental plant species. We're talking about lilies, begonias, African violets, roses, and even special types of landscaping grass. All of these have been meticulously bred and locked down with legal protection.
To really round out this picture, the system also protects 25 forage crops, the stuff that feeds livestock, including 5 different species of brachiaria grass. Throw in 14 distinct vegetable categories like tomatoes and onions, plus forestry species like eucalyptus, and you start to realize that the SNPC's reach is practically everywhere.
Moving to Section 6, Consulting Registered Cultivars, the practical application.
So say you're working in agribusiness. How do you actually get your hands on this data? Well, the gov.br portal makes it surprisingly easy. Anyone can hop online and go to the National Registry of Cultivars, or CNCR. They have this cultivar web system where you can search for specific plants, download massive master spreadsheets, or spit out exportable Excel reports. They even give you a direct email to the registry. It's completely modernized for real-world access.
Bringing this all full circle, let's look back at UPOV's core mission for a second. Beneath all the intense legal jargon, the lab tests, and the heavy bureaucracy, the ultimate goal is incredibly simple: to promote an effective system of plant protection for the benefit of society. By protecting a breeder's rights, the system actually incentivizes people to create better, stronger, and more nutritious plants for all of us.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. As climate change forces us to rapidly engineer tougher, more drought-resistant crops, who is ultimately going to hold the blueprints to our future food supply? This legal framework we've walked through today, it isn't just dry bureaucracy, it's literally the system that will define global food security for generations. Thanks so much for joining me on It's Explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you next time.